Alright, so this video is going to be on building a dashboard using the Shiny web application in R. So as you might remember from my previous video, the first thing we're going to do is load our data into R. And so that's what we're doing here on this first line. We've got the path where the file is stored. We're telling R that we want it to read our file, which is a CSV file, and we're pushing it into this variable called test_data. Next we have the packages that we're going to be invoking into our environment. Specifically, we're going to be using the Shiny app or package, and we're also going to be using the ggplot2 package. And we're going to be using this package to build the scatter plot that we're going to use for our dashboard. Now, as I mentioned, we are going to be building this dashboard using a web application. And so in order to do that, we're going to actually have to communicate with the server. And specifically, we need to tell our server what our inputs are, so what information we need to give R, as well as what we want our output to be. So what do we want R to spit out? And we're going to be using these to inform, the function. So down here we get a little bit more specific in terms of exactly what we want our output to look like. So we have output, $scatter. So we're telling R that we actually want R to spit out a scatter plot. So this is going to be what our output is. And we want this to occur based on everything we tell R here. So we're saying in order to build the scatter plot using the ggplot function, you're going to reference the test_data set, AES or aesthetic. Here we're telling R that we want to be able to see that our X axis, or the variables within X, are coming from POS_tote, and the ones coming from Y are EE_tote, or those are what our variables are. Next we have this line right here. This is essentially telling R, okay, we have a scatter plot. We want for our scatter plot to have points, and we want the size of those points to be 3. Next on the line we have Y-lim and X-lim, and here what we're specifying is the span that we want our axes to range. So we're saying that we want the y-axis to range from values of 0 to 100. You actually don't need this little bit right here. I included it because I was trying to mess with my graph to get it to just look prettier, essentially. Next we have the GG title. So this is going to be the title that we're going to have for our output or our scatter plot. So title_text is going to be what we're going to use for our title, and it's going to be, when we call upon the input, it's going to be referencing this right here. And we'll talk about this again once we get to the other syntax file. Stat_smooth. This is essentially a function that gives your audience an easier way of seeing the trends within your data. So when you have a bunch of scatter plots just really clustered together, or clustered on top of each other, it's difficult to see kind of what's going on. And so the stat smooth is a way of inserting different types of lines to kind of make it easier on your audience. So the method that we're going to be using within stat smooth is going to be the smooth_method. So that's what we're going to use, and that's going to be the input here. We're going to have a confidence level of 0.80. This na.rm equals true. Based on what I could find, it's basically telling R how to handle your data, specifically how to handle like missing data. I'm not completely certain. If you change this to false and you try to run it, I know when I did, I started to get some messages saying that some of my data were being deleted because they were non-infinite values. So if you don't want that to happen, just leave this as true. Next we have theme. So this whole section is essentially based on kind of what you want the particulars of your scatter plot to look like. So we're saying that for the text within the x-axis, whatever that text is, we want it to be size 8. So these could be like the anchors of perceived organizational support, for example. We have the same thing here, except it is for the y-axis. These two here are specifically looking at the titles of your x and y axis, and we're saying that we want them to be a size 16. And then last but not least, we have the plot title. So what do you want that actual title to look like? It's going to be size 32, it's going to be bold, and it's going to be justified towards the right. If you want it left justified, make this a smaller number. So yeah, that is this part of the syntax. So this is for the server. Now we get into the other part of the syntax, the UI.R. So essentially we are pushing all of this into UI. Fluid page is just our way of telling R that we want to be able to control the look and feel of this dashboard. We don't just want to have a fixed page. There are a bunch of other things that you can add to this to make it look even cooler. I did not include any of those things, so let's just jump into what I did include. So sidebar layout. On our dashboard, and you'll see this once we actually run it, there's going to be on the side essentially buttons that allow you to manipulate the line that you see on the scatter plot. And so this right here is basically allowing you to manipulate what shows up in that sidebar panel. So position equals right. This was my way of moving the sidebar from the left to the right. The default is left. And you can change this to either stay on the left, and apparently you can also change it to move up or down, or above or below your output or your main panel. Select input. This is where you're actually choosing the information that's being input into this sidebar panel. So input ID equals smooth method. This is referencing the input ID we had on the server.r syntax. And we're going to label this smooth underscore method. Choose your method of fit line smoothing. So that's what's going to show up above that box. Yeah, so the select input is a box with choices to select from, and here we're actually listing what the choices are. So choices equals, you could have none, you could have linear model, or you could have Loesch. This right here I found out was somewhat important, and beyond just creating your list for your choices. So here, if you want your any changes you want to see in your list, you make them right here. So for example, if you want none to be capitalized, you need to capitalize this N as opposed to this N. However, when you're actually referencing this throughout your syntax, you have to reference these right here, these lowercase words in single apostrophes or just apostrophes. So yeah. Next we have selected equals Loesch. That's just saying that Loesch is going to be our default. Now conditional panel, this is basically giving the condition with when we see these things or what we see when we see those things. So we're saying here, and let's actually start down here for this. So slider input, so we're saying all of this is going to inform the slider. It's referencing the input ID that we wrote out on the previous page. The label for the slider is going to be set the amount of smoothing. The minimum value on the slider is going to be 0.3. The maximum is going to be 0.9. The default starting value is going to be 0.3, and the increment that it increases with is going to be 0.05. Now this slide right here is saying do this except for when the audience or the respondent chooses none. And that's actually being what this exclamation point right here is responsible for. It's basically countering the logic that's within this line. So yeah, that's this section right here. Next we have text input. Now text input is our way of telling R that we want the respondent to actually be able to type into that. So we're referencing the title underscore text that we have on our server page. Label, it's going to be called, call it what you want to call it, and the value or what the default is going to look like is your title here. So when respondents actually go in to fix things or change the title, they would click right here, or where it says your title here. Main panel, so this is going to be where our output is spit out. So these things are going to comprise our main panel. So we have plot output because our output is going to be a plot. Here we are referencing the scatter plot that we referenced in our server syntax. We're saying the width of our scatter plot is going to be 900 and the height is going to be 400. So now we're going to hit run. And just wait for a minute. Apparently we're going to wait for a long minute. So this right here is the sidebar panel. So we can see that Loesch is our default. Here we have the slider where the default is 0.3, but it goes from 0.3 to 0.9. Here we have, and let me make this bigger, here we have where you can actually name your graph. So and when it's updated here, it will slowly update over here as well. And we can change the amount of smoothing. Sorry, the internet's being a little slow. So yeah, if we want to change the type of line we have, so here we have a Loesch line, we can change that to a linear model line, which is more straight. Yeah, and so that is how we build a scatterplot dashboard in R using the Shiny package.